Man, there is so much to talk about. I'm going to try and jam this all into 5 minutes. It's going to be more than 3 things. The Liberal leadership race, what's going on with TikTok, a reminder to never be a landlord in Ontario, an example of the freedom you get on Twitter, and what's going on in the oil markets. Let me start with TikTok. Red Note, the actual Chinese version of TikTok that's run by the actual Chinese government, has become the #1 app on the App Store. 700,000 people have flooded into Red Note. I've checked it out too. It's important to note that Red Note makes no concessions for English at all. It's all in Mandarin. Yeah, so Americans, rather than go to the heaping piles of shit that are the other social media offerings, like Meta and Twitter, they've decided to go to China. Will the United States risk their population causing an actual security risk, rather than just backtracking on the TikTok ban? We shall see. Speaking of the TikTok ban, it has been suggested to me that I go to a free platform like Twitter. It's so much better now that Elon Musk has taken over. Or maybe you live in a fantasy land. Let me show you the free speech that is Twitter. Benjamin Jackson has a strip club called Penthouse. And they like to do funny little viral messages on their marquee. Now, I would like to point out there is actual adult content on Twitter now. Like, full-on XXX. That doesn't get banned, but that does. It's in reference to this whole 51st State crack. If you don't understand why it's a reference to the 51st State crack, I'm not going to explain it to you. Nonetheless, does that look ban-worthy to you? Does that look like he's violated free speech in some way? Does that look like something that should not be shared? Since we're on the topic of the U.S. being dicks, Doug Ford says that this whole tariff thing and this economic war could cost Ontario 500,000 jobs. Yeah, that's a problem. In addition, the Bank of Canada has warned this could be a big blow to the GDP, according to their model. It would be worse than the Great Financial Collapse. How many of you applauded that big orange pile of garbage? Speaking of the big orange pile of garbage, so last week, the Biden administration put sanctions on Russia. The Defense Department has put certain firms on a blacklist. And Donald Trump has decided he's going to put sanctions on Chinese oil. Sent oil markets upward. Mr. I'm going to make gas super cheap has made gas super expensive. For the time being, it's good for us. The Canadian dollar has bounced back up to 70 cents. But over the long term, he's still a turd. And all for free speech. Don't forget that part. Now, all this stuff in oil is happening at a terrible time because this is shutdown season. The prices normally go up. Adding more pressure just makes them more expensive. Will it last? I don't know. The forecast is for an oversupply of oil for 2025 and 2026. So it should be cheaper. It's being made more expensive intentionally. All right, a quick reminder. Do not be a landlord in Ontario. Tenant removed from Ontario apartment after 4-year fight. She owes $55,000. However, the LTB ordered her to pay the maximum amount, which is $35,000. Here's a dirty little secret for you. If you're a tenant, you don't have to pay your rent. You can live rent-free from 1 to apparently 4 years if you choose to. Tenants think we need more tenant protections. No, we don't. We need more landlord protections. This kind of shit is keeping people out of the market and keeping the amount of rentals artificially low. If this went away, there'd be more places offered for rent. Like, imagine a boomer living in a home with an empty basement apartment. You know, this kind of shit stops them from renting it out. If this goes away, they would probably rent it out for $1,000 a month. Will we ever fix this problem? No. Because the narrative and public opinion is that we need to have more constraints, and more constraints, and more constraints, which drives the prices up, and up, and up. All right, let me round this out with the Liberal leadership race. Christy Clark has bowed out of the race because she's a conservative. And Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne has declined to join the race. We all know what's going to happen. Whoever takes over the PM seat is going to face a vote of non-confidence on day 1. Maybe day 2. But we're going to have a spring election. Whoever the PM ends up being, they will be one of the shortest tenured PMs in Canadian history. Okay, the shortest tenured PM is Sir Charles Tupper. He was in power for 68 days. It probably won't be that short. John Turner's 79 days? That could get beat. Kim Campbell's 132 days. That's possible. Joe Clark's 273 days. Totally going to get beat. I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere between John Turner's 79 days and Kim Campbell's 132. But before you go just jumping up and down because Pierre Poilievre is going to be the prime minister, and he will, let's face it, he will be the PM, I'd like to point out that many of the least tenured prime ministers, like out of the bottom 10, most of them are conservative. What happens? Well, let's go back to Joe Clark, because that's the most similar situation to what we have now. Back when Joe Clark was elected, everything was the fault of the Liberals. Side note, it wasn't. But they blamed the Liberals. So people voted in the Conservatives. And then the Conservatives failed to fix anything. So they quickly got voted out again. You have been told that much of the things you dislike are the fault of Justin Trudeau. And that's just not true. Yes, the Liberals have screwed up. I'm one of the biggest critics. The Liberals have screwed up. But much of what people are upset about has nothing to do with Justin Trudeau. Like your freedoms. And what are you going to do when the government changes, but your life doesn't?